3 streets away, an old man dropped a coin into a saucer of acid and swirled it gently. Broadman waited impatiently, ill at ease in a room made noisome by vats and bubbling beakers and lined with shelves containing shadowy shapes suggestive of skulls and stuffed impossibilities. "Well?" he demanded. "One cannot hurry these things," said the old alchemist peevishly. "A saying takes time." "Ah." He prodded the saucer where the coin now lay in a swirl of green color. He made some calculations on a strip of parchment. "Exceptionally interesting," he said at last. "Is it genuine?" The old man pursed his lips. "It depends on how you define the term," he said. "If you mean, is this the coin the same as, say, a $50 piece, then the answer is no." "I knew it!" screamed the innkeeper and started towards the door. "I'm not sure that I'm making myself clear," said the alchemist. Broadman turned round angrily. "What do you mean?" "Well, you see, what with one thing and another, our coinage has been somewhat watered down over the years. The gold content of the average coin is barely 4 parts in 12, the balance being made up of silver, copper, lead." "What of it?" "I said this coin isn't like ours. It is pure gold." After Broadman had left, at a run, the alchemist spent some time staring at the ceiling. Then he drew out a very small piece of thin parchment, rummaged for a pen amongst the debris on his workbench, and wrote a very short, small message. Then he went over to his cages of white doves, black cockerels, and other laboratory animals. From one cage he removed a glossy coated rat, rolled the parchment into the file attached to a hind leg, and let the animal go. It sniffed around the floor for a moment, then disappeared down the hole in the far wall. At about this time, a hitherto unsuccessful fortune teller, living on the other side of the block, chanced to glance into her scrying bowl, gave a small scream, and within the hour had sold her jewelry, various magical accoutrements, most of her clothes, and almost all her other possessions that could not be conveniently carried on the fastest horse she could buy. The fact that later on, when her house collapsed in flame, she herself died in a freak landslide in the Morpork Mountains proves that death, too, has a sense of humor. Also, at about the same moment as the homing rat disappeared into the maze of runs under the city, scurrying along in faultless obedience to an ancient instinct, the patrician of Ankh-Morpork picked up the letters delivered that morning by Albatross. He looked pensively at the topmost one again, and summoned his chief of spies. And in the broken drum, Rincewind was listening open-mouthed as Two-Flower talked. "So I decided to see for myself," the little man was saying. 8 years ago, saving up, this has cost me. But worth every half renu. I mean, here I am, in Ankh-Morpork, famed in song and story. I mean, in the streets that have known the tread of Herrick Whiteblade, Hrun the Barbarian, and Brovd the Hublender, and the Weasel. It's all just like I imagine, you know." Rincewind's face was a mask of fascinated horror. "I just couldn't stand it anymore back in Bespelagic," Two-Flower went on blithely. "Sitting at a desk all day, just adding up columns of figures, just a pension to look forward to at the end of it. Where's the romance in that? Two-Flower, I thought, it's now or never. You don't just have to listen to stories. You can go there. Now's the time to stop hanging around the docks listening to sailors' tales." So I compiled a phrase book and bought a passage on the next ship to the Brown Islands. No guards, murmured Rincewind. No, why? What have I got that's worth stealing? Rincewind coughed. You have, gold, he said. Barely 2,000 Reno. Hardly enough to keep a man alive for more than a month or two. At home, that is. I imagine they might stretch a bit further here. Would a Renu be one of those big gold coins? Said Rincewind. Yes. Two Flower looked worriedly at the wizard over the top of his strange seeing lenses. Will 2,000 be sufficient, do you think? Croaked Rincewind. I mean, yes, sufficient. Good. Um, is everyone in the Agatian Empire as rich as you? Me? Rich? Bless you. Whatever put that idea into your head? I am but a poor clerk. Did I pay the innkeeper too much, do you think? Two Flower added. Um, he might have settled for less, Rincewind conceded. Ah, I shall know better next time. I can see I have a lot to learn. An idea occurs to me, Rincewind. Would you perhaps consent to be employed as a, I don't know, perhaps the word guide would fit the circumstances? I think I could afford to pay you a Renu a day. Rincewind opened his mouth to reply, but felt the words huddled together in his throat, reluctant to emerge in a world that was rapidly going mad. Two Flower blushed. I have offended you, he said. It was an impertinent request to make of a professional man such as yourself. Doubtless you have many projects you wish to return to. Some works of high magic, no doubt. No, said Rincewind faintly. Not just at present. A renew, you say. One a day? Every day? I think perhaps in the circumstances I should make it 1 1/2 renew per day. Plus out of pocket expenses, of course. The wizard rallied magnificently. That will be fine, he said. Great. Two Flower reached into his pouch and took out a large round gold object, glanced at it for a moment, and slipped it back. Rincewind didn't get a chance to see it properly. I think, said the tourist, that I would like a little rest right now. It was a long crossing, and then perhaps you would care to call back at noon and we can take a look at the city. Sure. Then please be good enough to ask the innkeeper to show me to my room. Rincewind did so, and watched the nervous Broadman, who had arrived at a gallop from some back room, led the way up the wooden steps behind the bar. After a few seconds, the luggage got up and pattered across the floor after them. Then the wizard looked down at the 6 big coins in his hand. Two Flower had insisted on paying his first 4 days' wages in advance. Hugh nodded and smiled encouragingly. Rincewind snarled at him. As a student wizard, Rincewind had never achieved high marks in precognition. But now, unused circuits in his brain were throbbing, and the future might as well have been engraved in bright colors on his eyeballs. The space between his shoulder blades began to itch. The sensible thing to do, he knew, was to buy a horse. It would have to be a fast one, and expensive. Offhand, Rincewind couldn't think of any horse dealer he knew who was rich enough to give change out of almost a whole ounce of gold. And then, of course, the other 5 coins would help him set up a useful practice at some safe distance, say 200 miles. That would be the sensible thing. But what would happen to Two Flower? All alone in a city where even the cockroaches had an unerring instinct for gold? A man would have to be a real heel to leave him.